Move along, Janitor. This blackboard contains work that people like you could never understand. Dr. Harrison Pierce's voice cut through the midnight silence of Whitmore University's lecture hall, dripping with condescension from decades of academic privilege. Isaiah Washington, 58 years old, with calloused hands and graying beard, had been pushing his cart past the same blackboard for 12 years. Tonight was different. On that board was a mathematical monster, a variant of the Riemann hypothesis that had tormented the university's brightest minds for weeks. PhD candidates had stared until their eyes burned. Professors had scribbled theories until their chalk crumbled. Isaiah studied the equation for exactly 8 seconds. Then he did something that would shatter everything Dr. Pierce believed about intelligence and worth. He erased one symbol and replaced it with another. The equation solved itself. But how did a night janitor just accomplish what Harvard PhDs couldn't? 3 days later, Isaiah's simple chalk mark had created chaos. Word of the mysterious solution spread through Whitmore's mathematics department like wildfire. Dr. Pierce had tried to dismiss it as luck, but the numbers didn't lie. The solution was elegant, revolutionary, and undeniably correct. The timing couldn't have been more perfect or painful. The annual Northeast Mathematics Challenge was just 2 weeks away. 47 universities, $50,000 in prize money, a prestigious research position at any participating institution. For 12 consecutive years, Pierce had dominated the preliminary selections, nominating only his hand-picked graduate students. Isaiah needed that money desperately. His granddaughter Maya needed surgery that would cost more than he made in 2 years as a night janitor. His daughter Sarah, a single mother working as an elementary school teacher, was drowning in medical bills and student loans. At 58, Isaiah had accepted his place in the world's shadows. But Maya's innocent question last Sunday still echoed in his mind. "Grandpa, why can't you be a real teacher again?" The truth was more complicated than a 7-year-old could understand. Isaiah Washington wasn't just any janitor. 5 years ago, he published a groundbreaking paper on prime distribution patterns under the name I. Washington. The academic world had cited his work, built theories upon his foundation, never knowing the author now mopped their floors. Pierce's prejudice wasn't personal, it was systematic. In his world, intelligence came with pedigree. Harvard PhDs, MIT fellowships, published dissertations from respected advisors. The idea that profound mathematical insight could emerge from someone who cleaned toilets violated everything he believed about merit and natural order. But Pierce had reasons for his confidence. He'd authored 3 major theorems that NASA still used in satellite trajectory calculations. His office walls displayed degrees from Cambridge and Yale. For 15 years, he'd identified mathematical talent with surgical precision. His track record spoke for itself until now. The competition rules were straightforward. Any professor could nominate a single candidate. A 4-hour written examination would narrow the field to 10 finalists. Those 10 would face public oral presentations, judged by a panel of 5 distinguished mathematicians. The winner would be decided by pure mathematical ability. Pierce controlled the nomination process for Whitmore. He could simply ignore Isaiah's existence, continuing his perfect streak of nominating graduate students. No one would question his judgment. No one would even know Isaiah wanted to compete. Except Rosa Martinez, the cleaning supervisor, had other plans. She'd watched Isaiah for 12 years, seen him quietly correct errors in textbooks left behind by careless students. She'd found notebooks hidden in his locker, filled with original proofs that would make tenured professors weep with envy. Rosa knew talent when she saw it, regardless of the package it came in. "Dr. Pierce?" She knocked on his office door Tuesday morning. "I have someone I'd like you to meet." Pierce barely looked up from his computer. "If this is about scheduling, speak to my assistant." "It's about the mathematics competition. I believe you should nominate Isaiah Washington." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Pierce slowly raised his eyes, his expression shifting from annoyance to disbelief to something approaching amusement. The janitor? Rosa, I appreciate your loyalty to staff, but the Northeast Challenge isn't a charity event. This is serious mathematics. So was that equation he solved 3 nights ago? Pierce's jaw tightened. He'd hoped that embarrassing moment would disappear quietly. That was luck. Beginner's luck. Then prove it. Rosa's voice carried a challenge that made Pierce's academic pride bristle. Give him one real problem. If he fails, I'll never mention this again. If he succeeds... She paused, knowing she was pushing a dangerous man toward a corner. Then maybe you'll discover that intelligence doesn't always come wrapped in Ivy League diplomas. Pierce leaned back in his leather chair, considering. His reputation was unassailable. 15 years of perfect judgment. 3 major publications this year alone. What harm could come from humiliating one delusional janitor? If anything, it would reinforce the natural order of things. Fine. Bring him here Friday evening, after the building closes. I'll give him exactly 1 question from our preliminary examination bank. 10 minutes. No calculator, no references, just chalk and basic reasoning. Rosa smiled, but Pierce wasn't finished. When he fails, and he will fail, I want you to understand something. Mathematics isn't democratic. It doesn't care about feelings or fair chances. It demands years of rigorous training, advanced degrees, and intellectual discipline that comes from proper education. Your janitor friend is about to learn that harsh reality. What Pierce didn't know was that Isaiah had been preparing for this moment his entire life. But would 12 years of invisibility prove too heavy a burden to overcome? Friday evening arrived like a storm cloud over Whitmore University. The mathematics building stood empty except for the fluorescent glow emanating from Pierce's corner office. Isaiah had finished his cleaning rounds early, his hands trembling slightly as he knocked on the door marked Department Head. Enter. Pierce's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Isaiah stepped inside, still wearing his janitor's uniform. The office reeked of privileged leather-bound books, framed degrees, awards glinting in display cases. Pierce sat behind his mahogany desk like a judge preparing to deliver a death sentence. Mr. Washington, I presume? Pierce didn't offer him a seat. Rosa tells me you fancy yourself mathematically inclined. I used to teach at community college, Isaiah replied quietly. Before the budget cuts. Pierce's eyebrows raised mockingly. Community college? How quaint. Well, let's see what passes for mathematics education at that level. He stood and walked to a pristine whiteboard, selecting a blue marker with theatrical precision. This is a topology problem from our preliminary examination. Graduate students typically require 3 hours and sophisticated software to solve it. I'm giving you 10 minutes, no calculator, no references, just chalk and whatever intuition you possess. Isaiah studied the problem Pierce had written. It was indeed complex, a question about manifold boundaries that would challenge most PhD candidates. The trap was obvious to anyone with real mathematical training. Pierce had embedded multiple layers of difficulty, each designed to expose different levels of incompetence. The clock starts now, Pierce announced, settling back into his chair with visible satisfaction. Isaiah approached the board slowly. At 58, he'd learned that rushing toward failure only made the humiliation more complete. He could walk away right now, keep his dignity, his job, his quiet life in the shadows. At his age, perhaps invisibility was a mercy. But Maya's face appeared in his mind. 7 years old, lying in a hospital bed, asking when the pain would stop. His daughter Sarah works double shifts just to keep their heads above water. The surgery date looming like a countdown to disaster. Isaiah picked up the chalk. What Pierce didn't know was that this exact problem had appeared in the Journal of Advanced Topology 3 years ago. Isaiah had not only solved it, but had published a more elegant solution in a follow-up paper. Under a pseudonym, of course. The academic world wasn't ready for a community college professor to outshine their tenured elite. Interesting choice, Isaiah murmured, writing his first line. Though I think there's a more direct approach. Pierce leaned forward, expecting to watch a man drown in mathematical complexity. Instead, he watched Isaiah identify the problem's core structure in 30 seconds. The janitor's chalk moved with surgical precision, building a solution that bypassed the traditional 3-hour methodology entirely. "You're assuming the manifold is compact," Isaiah explained, his voice gaining confidence. "But if we relax that assumption and apply the Poincaré duality theorem differently..." 3 minutes later, Isaiah set down the chalk. The whiteboard displayed a solution so elegant it looked almost simple. Pierce stared at the work, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something approaching panic. "This can't be correct," Pierce whispered, pulling out his phone to verify the mathematical steps. "It is," Isaiah said quietly. "Though I did spot an error in your original formulation. The boundary condition in line 4 assumes convergence, but the series actually diverges at x equals 0. Pierce's phone confirmed what his pride refused to accept. The solution was flawless. More than flawless, it was brilliant. For 12 years, Pierce had walked past this man every day, seeing only a janitor with a mop. Now he was faced with undeniable proof that profound intelligence had been invisible in plain sight. His worldview cracked like ice under sudden heat. "You solved it in 3 minutes," Pierce said, his voice hollow. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are invisible to complicated minds," Isaiah replied. Pierce's academic arrogance warred with mathematical honesty. He could deny the evidence, dismiss it as another fluke. Or he could make a decision that would change everything. What choice would a man make when faced with the collapse of everything he believed about merit and worth? Pierce stared at the whiteboard for a full minute, his phone displaying mathematical verification websites. Every algorithm confirmed what his eyes refused to accept. The janitor had solved a graduate-level topology problem in 3 minutes. "This changes nothing," Pierce said finally, his voice tight. "One lucky guess doesn't make you a mathematician." But something had shifted. Word of Friday evening had leaked. By Monday morning, whispers filled the mathematics building. Graduate students huddled around computers, searching for Washington publications. Pierce couldn't let this challenge stand unanswered. If word spread that a janitor was outperforming his students, his reputation would crumble. He made a decision that would either destroy Isaiah permanently or elevate him beyond Pierce's control. Tuesday afternoon, Pierce arranged an impromptu demonstration. He gathered his advanced calculus class 23 graduate students from the world's most prestigious universities, future professors, research scientists, mathematical elite. "Today we have a special guest," Pierce announced with theatrical precision. "Mr. Washington, our facilities maintenance specialist, believes he can contribute to our mathematical discourse." Isaiah stood at the classroom's edge, still wearing his janitor's uniform. Students' expressions ranged from curiosity to barely concealed amusement. Someone in the back row snickered. Another whispered about diversity initiatives gone wrong. Pierce had prepared his trap carefully. On the blackboard, he'd written a multivariable calculus problem that appeared straightforward but contained 3 deliberate errors. 2 were obvious mistakes that would catch amateur mathematicians immediately. The third was subtle, embedded in the 4th line where Pierce had assumed convergence without proving it. "Mr. Washington, would you care to check my work?" Pierce's smile carried the sharp edge of a blade. "I want to ensure our solution is accessible to all educational backgrounds." Isaiah approached the board slowly. 23 pairs of eyes tracked his movement. Someone pulled out a phone, sensing viral content. Another student opened a live stream app. Within minutes, Janitor versus Professor was broadcasting to hundreds of viewers. Isaiah studied the problem for 30 seconds. Pierce had chosen well. This was exactly the type designed to expose mathematical frauds. Anyone without serious training would either miss the errors entirely or spot only the obvious ones. "Your first error is here," Isaiah said, pointing to line 2. The partial derivative of x squared with respect to y should be 0, not 2x. A few students nodded. Elementary mistake. Pierce's expression remained confident. And here, Isaiah continued, indicating line 5. You've applied the chain rule incorrectly. Should be cos x times the derivative of the inner function. More nodding from the audience, still within reach of an intelligent amateur. Pierce's trap was working perfectly. Isaiah paused at line 4, the subtle error that had fooled PhD candidates for years. Pierce leaned forward, anticipating the moment when the janitor would declare the remaining work correct. But this is where it gets interesting, Isaiah said quietly. Everything else looks mathematically sound, but something feels wrong about the final answer. He erased Pierce's work and began rebuilding the solution from scratch. His chalk moved with quiet confidence, each step flowing naturally into the next. The room fell silent except for soft scratching. The issue is here in line 4, Isaiah explained, his voice gaining strength. Dr. Pierce, you've assumed convergence of this infinite series, but if we test it at the boundary condition... He wrote a quick proof. The series actually diverges at x equals 0. The assumption fails. A graduate student in the front row pulled out her laptop, frantically checking the mathematics. Her eyes widened. He's right, she whispered, loud enough for neighbors to hear. The whisper spread like wildfire. Phones appeared as students verified Isaiah's work. The live stream viewer count climbed past 1,000. Comments flooded in, half supportive, half skeptical, all engaged. Pierce felt his carefully constructed trap collapsing. That's a very minor technical point, he stammered. Minor? Isaiah turned to face the class. If we're calculating stress loads for bridge construction using this formula, that divergence could mean the difference between safety and catastrophe. Mathematics doesn't forgive minor errors when lives are at stake. The authority in Isaiah's voice surprised everyone, including himself. For 12 years, he'd spoken only when spoken to, moved through academic spaces like a ghost. Now, surrounded by doctoral students and facing a tenured professor, something awakened in him. There's a more elegant approach, Isaiah continued, turning back to the board. If we use the fundamental theorem of calculus differently and apply L'Hopital's rule here, his new solution unfolded like poetry. Where Pierce's method required 6 pages of complex manipulation, Isaiah's approach reached the same answer in 12 lines. But more than elegant, it was bulletproof. No hidden assumptions, no convergence issues, no boundary problems. The classroom erupted in murmurs. Students compared Isaiah's solution to their textbooks, finding his method superior to standard approaches they'd memorized. The live stream chat exploded with mathematical symbols as viewers worldwide attempted to follow along. Pierce's face had drained of color. In 15 minutes, a janitor had not only corrected his errors, but demonstrated deeper understanding of calculus than most of his graduate students possessed. Sometimes the simplest solutions are invisible to complicated minds, Isaiah said, setting down the chalk. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then, slowly, one student began to clap. Another joined. Within seconds, the entire classroom was applauding, not mockingly, but with genuine respect for mathematical brilliance. Pierce's worldview cracked wider. This wasn't luck or intuition. This was profound mathematical understanding delivered with the clarity that marked truly great teachers. But admitting Isaiah's superiority would destroy everything Pierce had built. His reputation, his authority, his sense of self-worth, all balanced on this moment's edge. Impressive, Pierce said finally, his voice strained. But solving classroom problems is quite different from competing against the mathematical elite. The live stream had reached 5,000 viewers. Comments demanded more. Students were filming with phones. The moment was spiraling beyond Pierce's control. Perhaps, Pierce continued, his pride making a desperate gamble. You'd be interested in proving yourself on a larger stage? What had started as humiliation was becoming something far more dangerous, a public challenge that would force one of them to fall. The viral video changed everything overnight. Janitor destroys professor in math showdown exploded across social media platforms. Within 24 hours, the clip had 2 million views, spawning countless reaction videos and heated debates worldwide. Pierce had intended to humiliate Isaiah in front of 23 graduate students. Instead, he'd created a mathematical folk hero whose story resonated far beyond academic circles. The underdog narrative struck a nerve in a world where ordinary people felt increasingly overlooked by educated elites. But viral fame came with a price Isaiah hadn't anticipated. Wednesday morning brought phone calls from local news stations. Thursday delivered protesters outside Whitmore University, some supporting Isaiah's right to compete, others demanding he know his place. By Friday, the story had reached the national media. Pierce found himself trapped by his own public challenge. Backing down now would confirm what the internet already suspected, that his authority rested on prejudice rather than merit. So he doubled down, formally nominating Isaiah for the annual Northeast Mathematics Challenge. The competition landscape was brutal. 47 universities, 47 candidates representing the absolute pinnacle of mathematical talent. Harvard sent Rebecca Carter, a 24-year-old prodigy who'd published 12 peer-reviewed papers. MIT nominated David Goldstein, whose doctoral thesis on quantum topology had been called revolutionary. Yale's candidate, Maria Santos, had solved 3 previously unsolved theorems before her 26th birthday. Princeton brought Jonathan Hayes, who'd been offered professorship positions at 4 universities before completing his PhD. Stanford's representative had consulted for NASA on Mars mission calculations. Isaiah was the only nominee over 30, the only one without a doctorate, the only one who'd spent the last 12 years invisible to the academic world that now scrutinized his every move. The competition rules seemed designed to crush amateur pretenders. A 4-hour written examination covering advanced topology, quantum mathematics, and theoretical number theory. Candidates would be sequestered, monitored, and tested under conditions that had broken graduate students in previous years. The top 10 scorers would advance to public oral presentations, judged by a panel of 5 distinguished mathematicians. Each finalist would receive a randomly selected unsolved problem and have 90 minutes to present their approach before a live audience of academic luminaries. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the visiting MIT professor who chaired the judging panel, had been watching Isaiah's story with intense interest. She recognized the name I. Washington from citations in her own research. The mathematical insights attributed to that pseudonym had influenced her work for years. But knowing someone's theoretical brilliance and watching them perform under pressure were entirely different challenges. The Northeast Challenge had a 50-year history of breaking confident candidates who crumbled when faced with true mathematical elite. Pierce's confidence began returning as the competition date approached. He'd been reviewing Isaiah's published work, searching for weaknesses. Community college teaching, limited research resources, 12 years of intellectual isolation. These factors would inevitably show under serious scrutiny. Moreover, Pierce still controlled significant influence over the preliminary examination. As a member of the organizing committee, he could ensure the questions favored candidates with traditional academic backgrounds. Mathematical problems requiring familiarity with advanced graduate coursework, specialized terminology, and research methodologies that self-taught mathematicians typically lacked. The psychological pressure was already taking its toll on Isaiah. Media attention had transformed his quiet life into a circus. Reporters camped outside his modest apartment. Social media comments dissected his every public appearance. Late-night talk show hosts made jokes about janitors thinking they're Einstein. More painfully, the attention was affecting his family. His daughter Sarah received threatening phone calls from people who believed Isaiah was uppity and needed to be put back in his place. 7-year-old Maya came home from school crying because classmates were saying cruel things about Grandpa the janitor trying to be smart. "Dad, maybe you should withdraw," Sarah suggested during one particularly difficult evening. "Maya's surgery can wait. We'll find another way." Isaiah looked at his granddaughter, who was pretending to read while obviously listening to every word. At 58, he'd learned that dreams deferred often became dreams denied. But he'd also learned that fighting for dignity sometimes required accepting that victory might be impossible. "What do you think, Maya?" he asked gently. The 7-year-old looked up with eyes far too serious for her age. "Grandpa, are you really as smart as those people on TV?" "I don't know, sweetheart. That's what we're going to find out." "Then I think you should try, even if it's scary." The innocence in her voice reminded Isaiah why he'd started this journey. Not to prove anything to Pierce or the academic world, not to satisfy internet strangers or social media commenters, but to show his granddaughter that intelligence and worth weren't determined by job titles or social status. 3 days before the competition, Pierce made his final move. He leaked information suggesting that Isaiah's viral success was a publicity stunt orchestrated by university administrators seeking diversity headlines. Anonymous sources claimed the janitor had been coached, that his solutions were plagiarized, that the entire story was manufactured for social media consumption. The leaked story gained traction among Pierce's academic allies. Doubt began creeping into public perception. Even some of Isaiah's supporters started questioning whether they'd been manipulated by clever marketing. Isaiah read the articles on his phone while mopping floors in the same lecture hall where everything had started. The equations on the blackboard had changed, but the weight of expectations remained crushing. In 3 days, he would face the mathematical elite in a competition broadcast live to millions of viewers. He could withdraw now, claim victory in the moral realm, return to his invisible life with dignity intact. But as he looked at that blackboard, Isaiah realized something Pierce had never understood about mathematics. It didn't care about reputation, politics, or social engineering. Numbers were honest. Proofs were pure. Could a 58-year-old janitor prove that brilliance transcends circumstances? Or would the academic establishment finally crush this inconvenient challenge to their ordered world? 48 hours until the Northeast Mathematics Challenge. The countdown had become a heartbeat in Isaiah's chest, marking time toward either vindication or humiliation on a national stage. Monday morning brought the first mini-victory. Marcus, the university's head librarian, approached Isaiah during his lunch break with a key card and a whispered conspiracy. Academic library. 24-hour access. Security cameras have mysterious blind spots near the graduate mathematics section. Marcus winked. Some of us believe in what you're doing. That night, Isaiah walked through Whitmore's library like a ghost returning to a former life. His fingers traced the spines of books he'd once taught from, journals where his pseudonymous work appeared, theoretical texts that had shaped his understanding of mathematical truth. For 12 years, he'd been banned from this intellectual sanctuary by circumstance. Now he was stealing back pieces of his identity. But Tuesday revealed the brutal reality of his isolation. While other candidates had access to private tutors, study groups, and professional coaching, Isaiah faced the mathematical elite alone. Harvard's Rebecca Carter had 5 graduate assistants helping her prepare. MIT's David Goldstein was working with 3 professors who'd served as previous competition judges. Isaiah had Wikipedia and library books. The disadvantage became crushing when Pierce exercised his administrative authority. Tuesday afternoon brought a memo assigning Isaiah additional cleaning shifts throughout the week. Facilities must be spotless for visiting academics, Pierce explained with transparent malice. I'm sure you understand the importance of maintaining professional standards. The message was clear. Pierce intended to exhaust Isaiah before the competition even began. Wednesday brought unexpected hope. Word of Isaiah's story had reached sympathetic graduate students across multiple universities. An underground network formed overnight, students secretly sharing study materials, practice problems, and insider knowledge about competition formats. Emma Rodriguez, a PhD candidate from Columbia, sent encrypted files containing 5 years of previous examination questions. David Kim from Berkeley smuggled photocopies of advanced topology texts. Sarah Martinez from University of Chicago mailed practice problems with detailed solution guides. Academic solidarity transcends institutional politics, Emma wrote in an accompanying note. Show them that brilliance comes from passion, not pedigree. But Pierce's allies were mobilizing their own campaign. Wednesday evening brought devastating news. Anonymous sources had provided evidence to academic blogs suggesting Isaiah's viral solutions were actually the work of a ghostwriter. The mathematical community split into hostile factions, those supporting the underdog narrative versus those defending institutional integrity. The psychological warfare was taking its toll. Isaiah's daughter Sarah found their apartment mailbox stuffed with hate mail. Someone had spray-painted fraud across Isaiah's car windshield. Maya's teacher called to report that the 7-year-old was being bullied by classmates whose parents had poisoned them against Grandpa's lies. Thursday morning brought the cruelest blow yet. Pierce announced that Isaiah's cleaning schedule would require him to work until 3 a.m. on Thursday night, less than 12 hours before the competition began. Emergency deep cleaning of the mathematics building, Pierce explained to university administration. Essential preparation for our distinguished visitors. Isaiah's hands shook as he pushed his cart through familiar hallways at 2:30 a.m. Exhaustion clouded his thinking. Mathematical formulas that once flowed like music now felt fragmented and unclear. Pierce's strategy was working. Even if Isaiah's mind was brilliant, sleep deprivation would cripple his performance. But Rosa Martinez had been watching Pierce's sabotage with growing anger. At 3:15 a.m., she found Isaiah slumped over his mop bucket, nearly unconscious from fatigue. "Mijo, go home. I'll finish this. Pierce will fire me if—" "Let him try. I've been documenting his harassment for weeks. The union lawyers are very interested in his behavior." Isaiah stumbled home to grab 4 hours of sleep, but his mind wouldn't quiet. Doubt crept through the cracks in his confidence. Maybe Pierce was right. Maybe community college teaching and 12 years of intellectual isolation had dulled his abilities. Maybe he was about to humiliate himself and his family on a national stage. Friday morning arrived gray and unforgiving. Isaiah woke with equations swimming behind his eyes, half-remembered theorems tangling in his exhausted brain. The competition began at 9 a.m. By 8:30, he was standing outside Whitmore's Grand Auditorium, watching academic luminaries arrive in expensive cars and tailored suits. Dr. Elena Rodriguez spotted him immediately. The MIT professor approached with surprising warmth. "Mr. Washington, I'm Elena Rodriguez. I've been following your story with great interest." Isaiah nodded nervously. "Dr. Rodriguez, I've read your work on quantum topology. Brilliant stuff." Elena's eyes sharpened. "Have you really? Most people find it impenetrable." "Your proof technique in the 2019 paper was elegant, though I wondered if the boundary conditions could be simplified using the Poincaré duality theorem." Elena stared at him for a long moment. This wasn't the superficial familiarity of someone who'd skimmed abstracts. This was deep mathematical understanding. That's exactly what I've been exploring in my current research. How did you—" She caught herself. "We'll talk after the competition." As Isaiah entered the auditorium, he felt the weight of 46 pairs of eyes studying him. The other candidates looked like they'd stepped from university recruitment brochures, young, confident, surrounded by support teams of advisors and coaches. Pierce stood at the front of the room wearing his authority-like armor. "Candidates, you have 4 hours to complete the examination. No calculators, no references, no communication with anyone outside this room. Your responses will be anonymized and graded by an independent panel. Isaiah found his assigned seat number 47 in the back corner, isolated from the other candidates. Pierce's final petty gesture. But as Isaiah opened the examination booklet, something unexpected happened. The equations on the first page seemed to smile at him. Mathematical relationships that had felt fragmented in his exhaustion suddenly clicked into focus. This wasn't about Pierce's games or social media drama or academic politics. This was about mathematical truth. And mathematical truth was the one arena where Isaiah Washington had never been defeated. The first problem was a complex analysis question involving Riemann surfaces. Isaiah smiled as he began writing. He'd solved a similar problem for his dissertation 15 years ago, work that had been cited in dozens of subsequent papers. Around him, other candidates were frantically scribbling, erasing, starting over. The MIT prodigy was already sweating. Harvard's representative kept checking his watch nervously. Isaiah's chalk moved with quiet confidence. Problem after problem yielded to approaches that felt as natural as breathing. Topology, number theory, abstract algebra domains where he'd been thinking and creating for decades, even when the world couldn't see. 3 hours in, Isaiah had completed the entire examination. He used the remaining hour to check his work, refine his proofs, and add elegant touches that would distinguish his solutions from standard approaches. As the time expired and booklets were collected, Isaiah caught Dr. Rodriguez watching him with undisguised curiosity. Other candidates looked shell-shocked, comparing notes about problems they couldn't solve. But Isaiah felt something he hadn't experienced in 12 years, the pure joy of mathematical discovery, shared in a room full of people who understood its beauty. The preliminary results would be announced in 2 hours. The top 10 scorers would advance to tomorrow's public presentations. Everything Isaiah had worked toward, everything his family had sacrificed, would be decided by anonymous graders who knew nothing about janitors or professors or viral videos. Only mathematics would judge him now. And for the first time in days, that felt like the fairest trial he could ask for. But would mathematical justice be enough to overcome the systematic forces arrayed against him? 2 hours felt like a lifetime. Isaiah sat in the university cafeteria, nursing cold coffee while social media exploded with speculation. #Janitor math was trending worldwide. Dr. Elena Rodriguez appeared at his table without invitation. "Mr. Washington, we need to talk. Privately." She led him to an empty classroom, closing the door behind them. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "Not Isaiah Washington, the janitor. I know your I. Washington, the mathematician." Isaiah's blood turned to ice. His carefully guarded secret was exposed. "Your paper on prime distribution patterns. I cited it in 3 MIT lectures. Your proof technique revolutionized infinite series convergence. I've been wondering for years who I. Washington really was." Elena showed him academic databases on her phone. 5 published papers, cited 847 times. Your work influenced research at Harvard, MIT, Princeton. You're not some lucky amateur. You're a mathematician whose insights shaped modern number theory. The foundation of Pierce's worldview began cracking. This wasn't about a janitor stumbling into mathematics. This was about a legitimate genius forced into invisibility. "But there's something else," Elena continued, voice dropping to a whisper. "Pierce didn't nominate you randomly. He's known about your publications for months. He figured out the pseudonym connection weeks ago." Isaiah's world tilted sideways. "What are you saying?" "He set you up. Pierce planned this humiliation from the beginning. He thought he could destroy a potential rival who didn't know his place by exposing you as a fraud on national television." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Pierce's confidence, his willingness to risk reputation, his psychological warfare, it only made sense if he'd known exactly who Isaiah was. "The preliminary judging is rigged too," Elena continued. "Pierce influenced the panel composition. 3 of the 5 judges are his allies. They've been instructed to ensure you don't advance, regardless of your performance." Isaiah felt walls closing in. Even mathematical brilliance meant nothing if the system was designed to crush him. Why tell me this? Elena's eyes hardened. Because mathematics should be about truth, not politics. And there's still one chance. She leaned forward. Tomorrow's public presentations use a different panel 5 professors who can't be bought. If you reach that stage, Pierce's influence disappears. But first, you must survive today's rigged results. The speaker crackled. Preliminary results will be posted in 5 minutes. Elena stood. Whatever happens, remember your mathematics is real. Your brilliance is undeniable. Don't let their games make you forget who you are. Walking toward the auditorium where 47 futures would be decided, Isaiah realized this competition had never been about mathematics. It was about power, control, and whether systematic prejudice could defeat genuine talent. Now that he knew Pierce's game, could Isaiah find a way to win despite a system designed to ensure his failure? The auditorium buzzed with tension as 47 candidates and supporters gathered around the posted results. Isaiah's heart hammered against his ribs as he pushed through the crowd, Elena Rodriguez beside him like a protective shield. The list was arranged by score, highest to lowest. Position 1 through 10 would advance to tomorrow's final presentations. Position 11 and below would pack their dreams and go home. Isaiah scanned the names, his eyes moving down with growing dread. Position 1, Rebecca Carter, Harvard. Position 2, David Goldstein, MIT. Position 3, Maria Santos, Yale. The academic aristocracy dominated the top positions exactly as the system intended. Position 8, Position 9, Position 10. Isaiah's name wasn't there. Position 11, Elena whispered, pointing to a line that felt like a death sentence. Isaiah Washington, Whitmore University. One position. One single point separated Isaiah from advancing. In any fair competition, his score would have placed him 3rd or 4th. But Pierce's rigged panel had done their work precisely, cutting him down with surgical efficiency. The crowd around the list erupted in celebration and devastation. Harvard's contingent cheered. MIT's supporters exchanged high fives. In the corner, Pierce stood with arms crossed, wearing the satisfied expression of a man whose careful planning had succeeded. Isaiah felt the eyes of the world upon him. Phones captured his reaction for instant global distribution. The viral Janitor had been exposed as exactly what Pierce claimed, a fraud who'd reached beyond his station and fallen predictably short. Social media exploded within minutes. #JanitorMath transformed from inspiration to mockery. Knew it was fake, became the trending sentiment. Stay in your lane, echoed across comment sections. The internet's fickle attention had already moved from celebrating the underdog to celebrating his downfall. Isaiah retreated to the same janitor's closet where he'd hidden his notebooks for 12 years. The cramped space felt like a confession booth where he could finally admit the truth at 58. Maybe he really was too old, too tired, too broken by the system to fight anymore. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone. Sarah's contact information appeared on the screen, waiting for the call that would end this humiliating experiment. Maya was scheduled for surgery in 3 weeks. They'd find another way, take out more loans, mortgage their futures for her health. Dreams were luxuries that working families couldn't afford. But before he could dial, his phone rang. Maya's name appeared on the screen. Grandpa? Her 7-year-old voice was small, uncertain. Mommy said you didn't win today. Isaiah's throat tightened. No, sweetheart. Grandpa didn't make it to the final round. Are you sad? The simple question cut deeper than any social media mockery. Yes, Maya. I'm very sad. Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of disappointed hopes. Grandpa, Maya said finally, my teacher showed our class your math video again today. She said you helped her understand something she couldn't figure out for 10 years. She said that was pretty amazing. Isaiah's eyes burned. In his darkest moment, a child's innocent observation cut through the noise of failure and humiliation. "Are you going to keep doing math?" Maya asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Isaiah looked around the closet that had been his refuge for over a decade. Cleaning supplies surrounded him, tools of invisibility, instruments of a life lived in society's margins. But Maya's voice carried no judgment, no awareness of social hierarchies or academic politics. To her, Grandpa was someone who could solve impossible problems and help teachers understand difficult concepts. Her perspective was pure, uncontaminated by the world's prejudices. "I don't know, sweetheart," Isaiah admitted. "Well," Maya said with the confidence that only children possess, "I think you should. Because you're really good at it. And being good at something means you should keep doing it, even when it's hard." After Maya hung up, Isaiah sat in the silence of his small space. Elena Rodriguez's words echoed in his memory. Tomorrow's public presentations use a different Panel 5 professors who can't be bought. Pierce's rigged preliminary system had crushed him, but the final round operated under different rules. The question wasn't whether Isaiah deserved to compete. His mathematics had already proven that. The question was whether he had the courage to fight a corrupt system one more time. His notebook lay on the floor where he'd dropped it, pages filled with elegant proofs and revolutionary insights. 12 years of hidden brilliance, waiting for one final chance to see daylight. Isaiah Washington picked up his notebook, walked out of the janitor's closet, and went to find Elena Rodriguez. Some fights were worth having, even when victory seemed impossible. Maybe especially then. But could a 58-year-old mathematician find a way to challenge a system that had already counted him out? Elena Rodriguez found Isaiah waiting outside her hotel room at 6 a.m., notebook clutched in his weathered hands like a weapon he'd finally decided to wield. "I want to appeal," he said simply. Elena's eyes lit up with fierce academic justice. "On what grounds?" "Scoring irregularities. I want an independent review of my preliminary examination." 2 hours later, they sat across from Dr. Margaret Carter, the competition's chief administrator and Harvard's most respected mathematician. Elena had called in decades of professional relationships to arrange this emergency meeting. "This is highly irregular," Dr. Carter said, reviewing Isaiah's preliminary exam through thick glasses. "Appeals are almost never granted." "Almost never isn't never," Elena replied. "And when a candidate's work shows clear evidence of advanced mathematical understanding, irregularities in scoring deserve investigation." Dr. Carter studied Isaiah's solutions with the intensity of a detective examining evidence. His approaches were unconventional but brilliant, solving complex problems through elegant shortcuts that revealed deep theoretical insight. "Your topology solution here," Dr. Carter pointed to page 3. "This isn't the standard method we teach." "No, ma'am," Isaiah replied. "Standard methods often ignore more efficient pathways. I found a route through Poincaré duality that reduces 6 pages of calculation to 12 lines. Dr. Carter's eyebrows rose. She spent 20 minutes checking Isaiah's work against mathematical databases, her expression growing more intrigued with each verification. "Mr. Washington, your preliminary exam shows mathematical sophistication that frankly contradicts your 11th place ranking." She turned to her computer, pulling up scoring records. "I'm ordering an immediate reevaluation by neutral judges." 3 hours later, the reevaluation results arrived. Isaiah's corrected score placed him 4th overall, well within the top 10 advancement threshold. Dr. Carter's face darkened as she reviewed the scoring discrepancies. "These irregularities will be investigated thoroughly after the competition. Mr. Washington, you are hereby reinstated to tomorrow's final presentations." The news exploded across academic circles within minutes. Pierce's influence network scrambled to contain damage, but the story had already broken. The competition's integrity had been compromised to prevent a janitor from advancing. That evening, the Whitmore University auditorium filled beyond capacity. 500 seats accommodated over 800 people, with attendees sitting in aisles and standing against walls. Outside, protesters held signs reading "Mathematical Justice" and "Truth over Prejudice." The live stream numbers were staggering. Over 2 million viewers from 67 countries watched as the 10 finalists prepared for presentations that would determine the Northeast Challenge champion. Isaiah stood backstage in his only good suit, a decade-old outfit that Sarah had pressed specially for the occasion. Around him, other candidates huddled with advisors, coaches, and support teams. Isaiah had Elena Rodriguez and a notebook filled with 12 years of suppressed brilliance. Pierce sat in the front row, his jaw clenched with the tension of a man watching his carefully constructed world collapse. The preliminary scoring scandal had triggered formal ethics investigations. His 15-year reign as Whitmore's mathematical authority hung by threads. "Finalists," Dr. Carter announced, "you will each receive an unsolved mathematical problem. You have 90 minutes to develop and present your approach to a solution. Judges will evaluate methodology, insight, and mathematical rigor." The problems were distributed randomly. Isaiah opened his envelope and smiled grimly. Inside was the Goldbach conjecture, one of mathematics' most famous unsolved problems, challenging mathematicians for over 250 years. The conjecture seemed simple. Every even integer greater than 2 can be expressed as the sum of 2 primes. But proving this statement had defeated brilliant minds from Euler to Erdős. Pierce had chosen this problem specifically, knowing it was impossible to solve in 90 minutes. Around the auditorium, other finalists received problems about quantum topology, advanced number theory, and algebraic geometry. Difficult challenges, but manageable within the time constraints. Pierce had rigged the random selection to ensure Isaiah received an unsolvable nightmare. "Dr. Pierce," Isaiah called out, his voice carrying across the silent auditorium, "I see you've given me the Goldbach conjecture." Pierce's confident smirk revealed everything. "Sometimes the most deserving challenges require the greatest problems, Mr. Washington." The audience sensed drama. Phones appeared as spectators realized they might witness either mathematical history or spectacular failure broadcast live to millions. Isaiah walked to the whiteboard with quiet confidence. "You're absolutely right, Dr. Pierce. The most deserving challenges do require the greatest problems." He began writing, his marker moving with practiced precision. "The Goldbach conjecture has resisted solution for 280 years because mathematicians have approached it as a problem about addition. But what if we reframe it as a problem about distribution?" The auditorium fell silent except for the scratch of marker on board. Isaiah's approach was immediately recognizable as revolutionary. He wasn't trying to prove Goldbach's conjecture directly. He was proving something more fundamental about how prime numbers distribute across integer sequences. "If we can demonstrate that prime gaps follow this particular pattern," Isaiah explained, building mathematical architecture that stunned the audience, "then Goldbach's conjecture becomes a natural consequence rather than an isolated statement." Dr. Elena Rodriguez leaned forward, her mathematician's mind racing to follow Isaiah's logic. Other judges frantically took notes, recognizing groundbreaking work unfolding before their eyes. 40 minutes in, Isaiah reached his crucial insight. The key lies in understanding that prime distribution isn't random. It follows subtle patterns that become visible only when we examine residue classes modulo certain carefully chosen integers. Pierce's confidence evaporated as he watched Isaiah construct a proof framework that was not only elegant, but potentially correct. This wasn't the fumbling amateur he'd expected to humiliate. This was a mathematical mind operating at the highest levels of theoretical sophistication. "Dr. Pierce," Isaiah said, turning from the board, "your assumption about this problem being unsolvable reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of mathematical possibility." The room held its breath. "Mathematics doesn't care about our preferences or prejudices. It doesn't respect social hierarchies or academic credentials. Sometimes the janitor sees patterns that professors miss, not because of luck or accident, but because different perspectives reveal different truths. Isaiah returned to the board, completing his argument with mathematical poetry that left seasoned academics speechless. His approach didn't fully solve Goldbach's conjecture that would require years of detailed verification. But he'd created a framework that was obviously correct and potentially revolutionary. The 90-minute timer rang. Isaiah set down his marker and faced the judges. I present a new approach to prime distribution analysis that suggests Goldbach's conjecture is not only solvable but inevitable. The complete proof will require extensive collaboration and verification, but the mathematical foundation is sound. The auditorium erupted. 2 million live stream viewers crashed comment servers worldwide. Mathematical journals would spend months analyzing Isaiah's work, but the immediate impact was undeniable. A janitor had just advanced mathematical knowledge in ways that tenured professors hadn't achieved in decades. Pierce sat frozen, his worldview shattered beyond repair. The man he'd tried to destroy had just demonstrated mathematical brilliance that exceeded his own capabilities. Dr. Carter stood slowly, her voice carrying across the silent auditorium. Mr. Washington, in 40 years of mathematical education, I have never witnessed such an elegant and insightful approach to an intractable problem. The audience exploded in standing ovation. Pierce remained seated, his face ashen with the realization that he'd been mathematically outclassed by someone he'd considered beneath notice. But this triumph was only the beginning. What consequences would follow when mathematical justice finally confronted institutional prejudice? The standing ovation lasted 4 minutes. When the auditorium quieted, Dr. Carter stepped forward with an announcement that would change everything. Before we declare tonight's winner, I must address irregularities discovered during our investigation. Pierce's face went ashen. He'd thought the scoring scandal was contained. Our review revealed systematic manipulation of preliminary scores and violation of mathematical ethics. Dr. Pierce, these communications between you and judges constitute conspiracy to defraud this competition. You instructed them to artificially lower Mr. Washington's scores regardless of merit. The audience gasped. Live stream comments exploded as millions witnessed corruption exposed in real time. Furthermore, Dr. Pierce knew about Mr. Washington's published work months ago. This was never about mathematical ability. This was about eliminating a perceived threat to institutional hierarchy. Pierce stood slowly, his reputation crumbling. Dr. Carter, I object to these accusations. The evidence is overwhelming, Dr. Carter interrupted. Email timestamps, judge testimonies, scoring analytics all confirm systematic fraud. She addressed the auditorium and live stream audience. The competition committee has voted unanimously. Dr. Pierce is banned from all future mathematical competitions and referred to university ethics boards. The crowd erupted. Social media exploded with #mathematical justice and #truthwins trending worldwide. Mr. Washington, your preliminary score should have placed you second overall. Combined with tonight's revolutionary presentation, you are the unanimous winner of this year's Northeast Mathematics Challenge. Isaiah felt the world shift. $50,000. A research position. Vindication broadcast to millions. Pierce's humiliation was complete. The man who'd orchestrated Isaiah's destruction now faced career ruin while his intended victim claimed the highest mathematical honor. Moreover, Dr. Carter announced, MIT is prepared to offer Mr. Washington a full professorship with tenure track, effective immediately. Elena Rodriguez smiled from the judges' panel, her promise of mathematical justice fulfilled. The twist wasn't just that Isaiah had won, it was that Pierce's scheme had backfired so completely that it elevated Isaiah beyond anything he'd originally dreamed. But as Isaiah looked at Pierce's destroyed expression, he realized that true victory required something more than professional success. What would he choose to do with the power that had just been placed in his hands? 3 hours later, the auditorium had emptied except for Isaiah and Pierce, who sat alone in the front row staring at his hands. Isaiah approached quietly, carrying the weight of complete victory. He could walk away now, savor his triumph, let Pierce face the consequences of his choices. Instead, he sat down beside the man who'd tried to destroy him. "Dr. Pierce," Isaiah said gently. Pierce looked up with hollow eyes. "Why? Why aren't you celebrating my downfall?" Isaiah considered the question that cut to the heart of everything they'd both learned. "Because this was never about you and me. It was about whether intelligence and worth are determined by circumstances or character." Pierce's voice cracked. "I was wrong about you. But more than that, I was wrong about everything I thought I knew about merit and value." The admission hung between them like a bridge across years of misunderstanding. "Mathematics taught me something tonight," Pierce continued. "Elegance often comes from the most unexpected sources. Your approach to Goldbach, it was beautiful. More beautiful than anything I've accomplished in 15 years. Isaiah nodded. "Dr. Pierce, intelligence isn't about where you start. It's about how far you're willing to go to find the truth." 6 months later, Whitmore University unveiled the Isaiah Washington Mathematics Opportunity Fund, a scholarship program for non-traditional students pursuing mathematical excellence. Pierce, in his final act as department head, had donated his entire retirement savings to establish the endowment. Maya's surgery was successful. She recovered completely, often visiting Isaiah's new MIT office, where he displayed a photo of her alongside his published theorems. Sarah returned to graduate school, pursuing her own dreams with financial security finally within reach. Isaiah's first day teaching at MIT brought students from every background imaginable: former janitors, single mothers, immigrants, night shift workers, all seeking mathematical truth without regard for social hierarchies. He wrote a new equation on the blackboard: intelligence plus opportunity equals infinite possibilities. A young woman in the back row raised her hand. "Professor Washington, my mom cleans offices at night. She says she's not smart enough for college math. What would you tell her?" Isaiah smiled, remembering a 7-year-old's innocent wisdom. "I'd tell her that intelligence doesn't discriminate. It shows up wherever curiosity meets courage, and that the world needs her perspective, especially in mathematics." The classroom buzzed with possibility as students from forgotten corners of society realized they belonged in the pursuit of mathematical truth. Intelligence isn't about where you start. It's about how far you're willing to go. Share this story if you believe everyone deserves the chance to show who they really are. If this video showed you how federal accountability can create real change, hit like and subscribe to Black Voices Uncut for more stories of justice in action. And remember, the next time you meet someone the world underestimates, look closer. You might be looking at genius. The most beautiful equations often come from the most unexpected minds.